Clay, we saw Renee Auberjonois in the Enterprise in the first season in a terrible episode called Oasis. And now we get Damar, the actor. I think his name is something Casey, right? Did I just tell you his name? And now I've completely forgotten it.
Casey Biggs.
Casey Biggs.
You did just tell me his name.
We're pulling the curtain back. Casey Biggs is in this episode as, I believe he's the alien captain. Now that I've thought about it and I seem so sure, but now I seem less sure. But I'm pretty sure he's the alien captain in this one. And Damar, a fan favorite, and one of my favorites from DS9.
You know, that's what people come to this show for, is the hard researched facts. About cast and crew.
That's the downside of the video. They can see my eyes over here scanning the Wikipedia page as I'm like, oh, what's going on? Video is the giveaway in a way that audio, as long as you speak confidently and just kind of kill time as you're scrolling furiously, you can sound like anything. But it's always good to see him in these things. He's great as Damar. He's okay as the captain in this episode, I suppose, but that's not his fault, I wouldn't say. We're going to be talking...
Kind of similar usages of him and Renee there as sort of ineffectual aliens who are just kind of there.
Yeah, that's an Enterprise staple, I think. Coming from DS9 into Enterprise, that's what you end up with. This is a better episode than Oasis, though. Not to spoil anything. We didn't like Oasis, but I at least I have a higher opinion of this episode. But let's get to it. I'll take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode, and we'll come back, and we're going to break down damage.
The comm system's still down, so we don't have a complete casualty list yet. So far, the news isn't good. 5 people are confirmed dead, dozens wounded. Most of the hull breaches have been contained with emergency bulkheads.
What about cargo bay 2?
I don't know. There's no way to get to it. A large portion of E-deck is still decompressed.
Weapons?
The aft torpedo launcher's working, but that's about it. I really don't know what's holding us together. But let's hope it doesn't give out.
Damage is the 19th episode of the 3rd season. Came out on April 21st, 2004. It is the 28th in the Xindi Crisis arc, written by Phyllis Strong, directed by James L. Conway. In-universe date, not specifically known, but it's 2154. In this episode, called Damage, the Enterprise crew must cope with devastating damage to the ship, with another alien ship needing assistance nearby. T'Pol seeks help from Phlox for some personal damage, and a dissent grows in the Xindi Council about it. This is a highly regarded Enterprise episode. Some people, before we started this, had mentioned that this might be the only 5 in Enterprise. You spoiled that by giving other episodes 5s. And you said that those episodes are better than
Eat
Damage.
it.
I have not yet given a 5. Everyone's it's like a pitcher's no hit streak. People are waiting on for me to just hit a single down the line and get on base and end this guy's thing. But Damage is the episode we're going to be talking about. I'm of a mind to talk about the T'Pol thing first. Would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's get that out of the way.
T'Pol's hidden freebase addiction.
T'Pol's heroin addiction to some glowy rock that at least the only thing I have
She's
to
doing
say,
meth, basically.
Yeah, the only thing I have to say was I was glad she didn't just smoke the shit after she pulled it out of that machine.
I was 100% sure she was going to smoke it because she cooks that thing down, and I was like, she's just going to smoke that shit.
Listener Kyle, maybe I should read his comment now at this point. I'll read his comments, and because I think that will inspire us here. So, to spoil his entire thing, he says, Kyle Barrett says, a great counterpoint to Anomaly in which the roles are switched, and here we have Archer's extreme measures being more believable given the situation when he tortured a guy a mere 2 episodes into the season. There were rocks falling from every hole in the ship, and the titular damage is executed well, especially when it leads to moody atmospheric discussions in the literal and metaphorical darkness. The drug addiction to Paul storyline is decent, but I struggle with the ludicrous way she takes them, melting down chunks of rocks and injecting the whole load into her neck. I would have much rather seen her with an old belt around the arm while she crouched over a burnt bent spoon and a Bic lighter, a blunt needle in one hand and cotton wool gauze in the other. Storyline also speaks of Kato's greater influence because it's him coming in and finding ways to explain things that he doesn't like in the show, like T'Pol's recent bout of jealousy and horniness. 4.5 warp coils that look like the TARDIS central console out of 5. So I read that, mostly because I don't like the drug storyline. And if this is a correction that they're trying to do, I like it even less as to what's going on here. So what Kyle and I think maybe other patrons are going to say is that this storyline is done to excuse her previous actions, where earlier in the season, I think the understanding is that Manikoto comes in and says, why is T'Pol acting this way, in a way that we've complained about before? Let's write a solution to this where she becomes addicted to heroin and is chasing the emotion dragon this entire season.
Yeah.
So in a Star Trek nerd sense, which is the least important sense, but I'm going to bring it up first to get it out of the way, I don't understand why Vulcans need this drug to chase emotion, because my understanding of what Vulcans are doing is that they feel things, but that they shut it down so that they don't.
Right.
So it's not that they have no emotion, and this is like Data getting his emotion pill, and he's like, I just need more of this. That's not the way the Vulcans are constructed in my mind. At least that's not the way that they should be, in my opinion. So I don't know why she needs a drug to unleash this either. And I don't like the fact that it looks exactly like either opium or heroin or something like that. And it's just so obviously a drug analogy that it is, in my opinion, I'm not going to give this a 5 because of this T'Pol storyline. There are other reasons too, other problems. But this T'Pol storyline is like unforgivable to be in a good episode, I think.
Yeah, I really disliked the T'Pol stuff. And again, I kind of to echo what you said, I dislike it even more if it was some sort of course correction, because I was more interested in T'Pol as a Vulcan who is kind of losing her edge just naturally from being around humans. I don't think that you need her to be on emotion drugs like equilibrium or something. Yeah, there's no reason to do that, and it comes out of absolutely nowhere. Like there's no. You could go back and watch the entire season again and not be like, okay, this is where she starts smoking meth. You know, like it's just a complete fabrication.
Well, you wouldn't say that she's been more rowdy the past couple episodes? We talked about it last episode. We were like, what's wrong with T'Pol?
Yeah, okay. If you want to count this one and the last one as one episode,
I would say it has not been a long time, but I think that they realized this within the past couple episodes and have now played it up. I think since Azadi, I think it was only Azadi Prime that where they got attacked and she was in the ready room freaking out, and Trip's like, you got to get out there. It was last episode.
Yeah, the last episode. Yeah, so clearly like they were planning to do this for one episode.
Right. Yep.
But it's just like it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't make a lick of sense as far as figuring out that she could freebase that stuff down into an injectable drug. I don't know. It's and to like, yeah, to what end?
I was so confused when she got the suit to go out there. I was like, what? Is she gonna like just see and scan this stuff to see if this is what's causing her the problem? And she goes and cracks off a piece of it and cooks it. It's like, well, that's not the way I expected this storyline to go whatsoever. Yeah. And I don't know. And sorry, go ahead. You haven't been speaking enough.
Well, I was just gonna say I feel like it undermines her character quite a bit to turn her into a drug addict. Like she's later on in the episode when Archer has to go back to the other ship, he doesn't know she's a drug addict, but it's pretty clear she's fucked up.
Yeah.
Like she's messed up, and he's just like, well, you have the bridge. And like
you've never
Phlox doesn't be like, hey, maybe don't put T'Pol in charge. She's a little bit on edge here.
Don't bring up Phlox. The other big thing I hate about this is Phlox. How can Phlox be like, this is just between the two of us when she's in charge of the ship with everything like that? There's got to be some kind of out to the patient confidentiality thing. She
was making decisions last episode while she was high on goofballs, and it got the ship blown up.
Yeah. No, it's true.
She is making decisions why is she just doing this because she just wants to feel stuff?
I think
that
so.
The deal?
That's her explanation, which is a very Data-esque nonsensical explanation for me as someone who cares somewhat about canon but isn't going to, but I think it's just the reason it matters is because it seems completely contrary to what the Vulcan identity is, which is like the whole point is they're not robots. They're just suppressing it. You know, I think that makes them different from robots, and it's a huge difference. And I think it's important to their species, basically.
Yeah, and it also bugs me, like, why is she doing this now? They're kind of doing something important, and she is putting this search for emotion, which I don't even know how she ended up figuring out that she could do it by smoking Trillium X or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah.
Triglyceride 9. And it's affecting her work as the first officer, and that does not feel like something that she would do. Like, what is the, maybe I missed it, maybe she said this. If she did, please tell me. What is the catalyst for this drug experimentation? Was there something that they did that she's like, it was after that moment that I realized that I needed to figure out how to feel stuff?
Well,
by
was
smoking
she
shit?
She began to experiment with Trillium after their encounter with the Vulcan ship, the zombie Vulcans, and how injecting herself with the compound allowed her to access certain emotions, but she's now addicted. So I was under the impression that she started to get a taste for it because they had aligned the ship with it to protect the ship from those anomalies. Mm-hmm. But Memory Alpha doesn't seem to say that at all. It just says she consults Phlox, who is shocked and needs to know precisely what's going on. I think he says that. I need to know precisely what's going on. T'Pol explains how she began to experiment with Trillium after their encounter with the Vulcan ship and how injecting it with the compound herself allowed her to access certain emotions. I don't know. If you have something to say about it, I'll try to look and see if there's another thing. But I was even giving it more credit, thinking that because they had aligned the ship with it, it had started to just seep into her, and she wanted more, and so she jumped to injecting it. Basically, it was like, this is I need to chase the dragon a little bit.
Well, I thought that they hadn't lined the ship with it because it fucked her up. Wasn't that the whole thing in that story? Is that they couldn't?
No, isn't that a sacrifice? Well, God damn it! Now I can't. Now I feel like I thought that episode.
I believe they ended up not lining the ship with it because it was messing her up too much.
That makes sense.
So they actively chose not to line the ship.
So that's why they have it in the hold, because they did not actually do the stuff with it.
Containers.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Never mind.
Yeah. It's just, I find it to be like a devastating undermine to her character at this point. And it's, I don't know. I do not think it is the right choice at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more interesting stuff going on in this episode, and like I guess thematically, they're trying to line it up with Archer's doing here, as far as like it's damage, literal and metaphorical, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but it's like this isn't a damage that we have any relationship to. If we learned that she was smoking Trillium X 5 episodes ago, and this is when it finally comes out, sure. Right. That makes perfect sense.
It's helpful to the audience to know, going into the Azadi episode, to know that she's compromised as the audience and not the crew is a much more interesting, oh shit, like what's T'Pol going to do because she's high at this time. Mm-hmm. I don't know why but to jump off that point, to go back to why didn't they line the ship? It only makes sense to me in some sort of narrative level if they decided to line the ship with it because it was the only way to get through the Expanse at the expense of T'Pol. And T'Pol,
which is not what they did. Yeah.
Not what they did. But if T'Pol agreed to that, and this degradation and addiction was because of her sacrifice to get the mission done, that makes more sense to me as a sort of metaphorical damage that she's been taking. But I don't think they did that. So I don't know what the point was. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was. I remember her reacting to it like it was kryptonite, basically. And like it
drove the other Vulcans insane. They became zombie brain eating. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I can't square that at all. I think it's a mistake. I think it's going to be even worse next episode or the episode afterwards, where she is just like fine and she doesn't do it anymore, and then she's back to being a robot again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't believe it's about chasing emotions. That's so stupid.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any. Even if they didn't do that, if she was just like, again, it's the line the hull. If she's the line the hull and she just needs it badly because she'll die without it or something, it's like, okay, well, I can kind of understand that. But she just has the worst rationale for the character who should have the best rationale about all of this stuff. Comes up with the worst one to keep.
Because it also, it's not like she's doing it for anybody's benefit. Like, I could see her doing it because she maybe she thinks it like keeps her sharp or something, or gives her some intention, at least in her own mind, some rationale that it helps the ship or helps her do her job or something. Yeah. But if it's a big no for me, dog.
I don't have much else to say about it, but it takes up a tremendous amount of episode in this episode, and
it really does. Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like the Phlox sequence with her. I don't like the fact that this is what has been. If this is an attempt to fix a storyline where T'Pol's portrayal has been strange to this point and out of Vulcan character, I think having her make a non-Vulcan character decision, like a pinnacle decision in that way, does not really fix the issue here. And as we've gone over, she just doesn't. There's no benefit to her here. It's just a greedy, strange decision that seems to be the opposite of that character. So when she's yelling at Archer about the sequence where Archer is deciding to rob these people and leave them behind, she's kind of losing her moral high ground there because she's so compromised in the things that she's been doing. And I don't think that's supposed to be the point of that. I don't think it's supposed to be like T'Pol's a hypocrite because she did all this stuff. It doesn't come across like that, but that'll jump us into the...
and that scene just kills me because, like, imagine... Jump forward 8 years or so, Wes, and a strung out Alistair comes in and starts yelling at you about the fact that he needs the car, and then smashes a vase on the floor, and then you just go, "All right, here are the keys." You know, you've never smashed my personal belongings before. You've never done that before. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't even acknowledge that she's acting unbecoming of a Vulcan.
I think he says you've been acting strange lately. I think that's his one. He's like, it's
okay, great. Even more perfect reason to give her the keys to the fucking ship.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the Archer plot, which is why I think everyone so highly regards this episode. I'm going to open this by asking you: Is my opinion, or the way that I'm taking Enterprise, to be true, or do you think that I'm being unnecessarily harsh on the show and looking at other shows with rose-tinted glasses? Is Enterprise, out of all the Trek shows we've covered so far, the least subtle in dialogue exposition as to what characters are thinking about as they do things? Do you think do the other Trek shows have moments where the character goes, "I don't have any other choice. I have to do this." I just think that the other shows, not that they're like Shakespearean in their writing, but I don't feel that they frequently had characters say things like that, or like that the bluntness of what they were doing was so expressed to everybody else. Like, there's no subtlety to what Archer is thinking or doing. I think a lot of this is in Bakula's performance. I think this is a terrible Bakula performance for what needs to be done here.
Guys, he's not getting this. We need to shut some lights off. We gotta get the drama out of this somehow. Just turn the lights off. Just keep turning the lights off.
Lower the exposure in post. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel that for everything that I like about this episode, the bluntness of they didn't give it to us, we have to take it. Like, I wish that they didn't talk about it so much that way. I wish it was more just of like the crew knew what was being asked of them and no one really talked about it. And maybe they do kind of do that, but I still feel that the Bakula performance and Archer's dialogue is really bad in this about what he's choosing to do.
Well, I actually was kind of surprised that they weren't. We might be remembering it differently. I don't know, but I didn't feel like they were as on the nose as I expected them to be. I feel like there's a certain point where once everybody was clued in, they kind of started talking pretty openly. But like the scene with Phlox, I thought was pretty good because he never comes out and says what he's gonna do.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that the Phlox scene works in a way that I expected the rest of it, but he has conversations with at least a handful of other people. I think maybe Reed and stuff like that about what they have to do, and some other people.
This is also so funny. Like you're doing this. You're having Archer make a decision that just is ethically shattering for what the Starfleet guys all think that their deal is and the code that they live by. 3 episodes after Archer almost killed the entire ship by giving them orders that nobody wanted to follow because they were ethically insane. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you had the Makos as a big part of that when the Makos were here. But
talk about
I feel like this is an episode,
the bug episode.
Hatchery.
Yeah.
I feel like the Makos could have been a bigger presence here as well because it's as far as like the decision making process, or at least in the because Archer is now actively bringing in the military arm to do something that they shouldn't have to do, but that they're just kind of in the background.
They're the guns
getting shot. Yeah. But yeah, I liked some of it. I think some of it played pretty well. Like I think that the scene where they just are all kind of talking about what needs to happen, I thought was interesting because they are trying to think about like the most ethical way to be unethical in a sense, as far as how they can get in there and get out and not destroy the ship and not completely strand them or whatever.
Yep. Don't take away their weapons because you can't be defenseless. Leave them food when you take their other thing. Leave them supplies and stuff like that. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Archer probably is laying it on a bit thick. But yeah, I thought everybody else handled it pretty well. I didn't think there was too much. Well, they had like one or two. What was it? He gets into the shouting match with T'Pol, and T'Pol smashes the thing on the corner of the desk, and then he gets into a similar argument with Trip, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't stand out too much as being like too over the top, but I might be misremembering how specific the dialogue actually was.
Yeah, I think it's and I guess that's why I wonder. It was my takeaway while I was watching it, thinking like, I just don't know. I don't know if Enterprise's script writing and dialogue writing matches some of the other series at their best when they're doing something like that, because it just seems a little bit like rudimentary or simplistic in a lot of ways compared to the other shows, where I think that the other shows maybe layer the stuff better. Like I really like this central conceit here about, we've certainly been building to this point across the season of, I wish it would have been more effectively built towards this point, but we've been talking about during the Xindi arc how eventually these episodes should just be a cascade of bad things happening to the Enterprise until they get to a point where they're like, well, we have to do something about that. And this is that point. I would agree with you that the downside of the storyline has been like the extreme, the fact that they treat the individual episodes as standalone Star Trek episodes where they adjust the ethics of the situation to work within the single episode, but they don't care about the long-term arc of it. So like Hatchery is a good example. And instead you end up here where I really like this. I like the idea of stealing something from another ship because they need it to get by and things like that. And I like the idea of straining them and things. I like this whole development. I think is appropriate and good for the episode. It's just that I think that sometimes the technical aspects of this show don't match up with the concept of it in a way that I'm like, oh, this is just a fantastic episode going on right now. It always feels like it's a little held back, and I don't know why, because I really like this. I like this idea, and I think it's just Archer's wishy-washiness across the whole season ends you in a place where you go like, well, he didn't seem this way the last episode. Now he seems completely unhinged in what's going on. And I just don't find this development to be anything satisfying whatsoever.
I do think that they actually set this up pretty well coming out of the last episode,
Yeah, which is essentially a two-parter. I would consider this to be a 1 and 2-parter.
Because they've got him blowing up the outpost on the moon, which is kind of his first step over the line, and then he's kind of wrestling with that stuff a little bit. It's kind of funny though that that this element comes after the point when he chooses diplomacy instead of blowing up everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. But yeah, I think they set that ball in motion well from the last episode. But yeah, as far as like a season long build up, not as clean as it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I was chuckling a little bit because the Casey Biggs alien guys that show up, it's just it very much feels like, the hayseed who shows up in New York and is like, hey, could somebody point me to a hotel? And then Archer's like, yeah, I can show you a hotel right around this corner. And then steals his wallet. It's like just out of nowhere they show up and they're like, hey, we're new to the Expanse. What's going on? The Xindi. I've never heard of the Xindi. Who are they?
Yeah.
What's going on here? You guys in a war or something?
Yep. Yeah. They should have just taken those guys at the end. They should have just taken them on the Enterprise or something.
Yeah.
Like, you can come with us and we'll drop you off at home. Yeah, they are. I guess I can't hold it against Casey Big. Those aliens are just kind of generic alien that walks in. It's almost like the design of their ship is more important. That the ship can't be too powerful for the Enterprise to actually capture. It can't be too fast for it to get away and stuff like that.
Right.
So the aliens that are on it are just generic guy who's like, I'd love to help, but I can't help. And then later on, them shaking their fists at the screen saying like, why would you do this to us? So there's nothing really there.
They felt very like Rick and Morty characters to me. Like that Rick and Morty's really good at like middle class aliens.
Yeah.
Who are aliens only because we don't understand what they are, but they're just kind of like, regular people.
Yeah.
Star Trek aliens are usually have some spin or some
a quirk,
grandeur or quirk or something. And these guys were just out here checking stuff out in the Expanse, getting some readings.
A lot of people exploring the Expanse, which is funny. Like virtually every alien they run into is just checking out the Expanse for the first time. So people like this storyline. I think this is, to its credit, this is the most complicated situation that I think the Enterprise has found itself in. Like, I didn't like the hatchery conundrum, really. I don't think that's especially a difficult decision that they had to make. People would seem to disagree, think that it's a kind of decision that Archer has or that the crew has. I disagree. That seemed different. This one seems much more personal, and you have to take action in this plot. The Enterprise has to do something. It can't just sort of walk away. And that makes it much more difficult and upsetting. I think my other sort of problem with the approach to this material is that because this is a series that doesn't do a lot of crew, ready room, conference room scenes, I feel there was a lot left on the table about how people were going to feel about this thing. Like they kind of bend to Archer's will, which is understandable because it seems like they have to do it and because they're in a desperate situation at this point. But I really wish the show focused more on the conversations between the characters and showed at least like some people have different opinions about this. Like someone has some kind of qualm about this. Even Phlox in this one's like, well, you got to do what you got to do. I'll get sickbay ready, and I can kind of understand that, but I wanted more discussion about that. Enterprise is not the show to do those discussions, which I think is what I always find to be lacking.
Yeah. They always kind of tiptoe around it a little bit in this one. And I think you're right. I think the lack of kind of ready room sequences probably hurts them because Enterprise usually does that stuff one-on-one. And this episode has like 4 different one-on-one things.
Yeah.
In a way that like TNG might handle it with everybody kind of talking at the same time kind of thing.
Yeah. But wouldn't it add depth to the story to just have a couple characters be like, this is wrong? Like what you're doing is wrong.
Sure.
Like
Absolutely.
Enterprise. And it comes down
Preferably
to,
ones who weren't fucking high out of their minds when they said it.
well, it just comes down to the cardboard supporting characters, like the people who are not the major three of this one, don't have any room to grow as characters because they just bend to whatever Archer does. Like, this is the most unilateral Star Trek show, I think. It's just what Archer says happens. Even Kirk was more willing to listen to what other people were talking about and sort of like get advice from all quarters. Archer is very, for how mild-mannered he is, he's extremely, I make the decisions on this ship and everyone will just kind of go along with what I want. I think there's just a tremendous lack of depth, and it's all surface level to just have everyone sort of go along with this, and the writers to expect that the conflict here and this decision is meaty enough to carry an episode like this. And it's almost is, but you still in a Star Trek show, I think, need some kind of disagreement or conflict about whether or not this is to do it. And then when it happens, you can have the fallout of those character interactions and the people who thought it was a good idea and the people who thought it was a bad idea. In the next episode, this can actually continue to play out. And they don't do that in this show, and it's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. Well, not surprised, but it plays a little bit weird that this kind of thing pops up kind of out of nowhere, where, you know, they have their conversation about, we got to get to this point by this day, but we can't get there because our warp core is fucked and whatever. And then it's like a cut to Archer walking through the dark room, and then Phlox comes in. They're kind of talking about ethics or whatever. And so you're kind of getting a sense of what they're going to do. Excuse me. And I was thinking, like, man, wouldn't it be that much more interesting if, like, they were having a conversation with the crew about what the next step was, and then Reed or in maybe the Makos captain or something was like, well, there's obviously only one choice here. We know that there's a ship in range that we can chase down that has what we need. We need to go take it. And then you can have Trip be, you know, like, we can't do that. We don't do that where I come from or whatever. Yeah. And
it's a little bit of a Section 31 argument, you know. The Makos should have a little bit of that Section 31 personality to them. Yeah,
and so that way you've got the cast kind of bouncing these ideas around, which are essentially the ideas that are bouncing around in Archer's head. And so when you have that scene when it's just him and Phlox and he makes his decision, it's like, okay, shit, this is what we're doing. You know, there's a little bit of there's a little bit more weight to it, a little bit more repercussions about, like, whether or not everybody's going to go along with it. You know, who's going to be kind of mad at who? Are they going to be mad at the Makos for suggesting it, or mad at Reed for suggesting it, or whatever?
Yep.
You know, you get a scene out of Trip, and instead of everybody yelling at Archer, you could get a scene out of Trip and the Mako captain, or Trip and Reed or something, like, we're like, how can you do that? We don't do that kind of thing, or, you know.
Yeah.
And like, well, you're the engineer. How else are we going to do it?
Yeah.
It's the only way we had to, you know, that kind of thing. And putting it all on Archer's shoulders, it makes sense given the way that they've been treating him in this show, especially the last few episodes, but giving him this kind of like Messiah complex a little bit. But I wish they would have spread it around a little bit, and had it be more of a decision that everybody, you know, like you're saying, that it wasn't as unilateral as the show tends to be. Because again, like, I'm surprised, like, Trip wasn't like, Captain, did one of those aliens spurt you with any juice or something when you ran into them? Because you're acting kind of weird.
Every time, Trip.
Are they from some species that just, you know, need someone to conquer them, so they just spray their submissive juices all over everybody?
Juice all over you. Yeah, I think that's the problem, really, is because I think that this show, while it's trying to do a serialized story, and it's somewhat effective at it, it does it in a way where what I think it misses, and what I think DS9 does better in a way of being a serialized storytelling, is that Enterprise's serialized storytelling is almost completely plot mechanics. It's like we're going to set up these plot strings that are going to connect here, and it's going to do this over here, and then we're going to, a couple episodes in, Archer will make this decision, and everything will sort of pan off. And the plot strings come together fairly effectively. The problem is that because the show tends to ignore its characters, the characters are stuck ping-ponging back and forth, supporting these plot mechanics to get them into place, right? And so they don't have this sense of where DS9, I felt its plot could get a little bit waffly sometimes because at least the character tendencies were consistent on that show. Like you knew how people were going to react to things. And so if you kind of went off a little bit, you'd be like, well, I can forgive the plot there because it makes more sense for Odo to react this way or Quark to do this or whatever. This show doesn't have it. And what it tends to do, while it keeps its plot serialized, it has very episodic treatment of characters. And the characters don't continue through episodes in this season. They just make decisions that are based on that episode by itself. And because the characters are somewhat cardboardy, you can have any character do anything, and it doesn't seem like it's really a problem in the sense of the episode because you don't know anything about this character. But in the serial story, it feels weird that this character is doing these things. And I think that's really what the problem of this season has been, is that their character growth is almost non-existent, or maybe their characterization across how these stories are going has not been as smooth as the plot build-up and the actual like narrative mechanic stuff, which I find is just the less interesting way to approach the storytelling, because in a show like Star Trek, so much of it is built around these people stuck in a tin can and how are they going to feel about it. And I couldn't tell you how anyone feels about it outside of they have these throwaway scenes where Hoshi's like, I wish I hadn't come out here. And Mayweather says, well, we'll get back sometime. And then it cuts to the next person saying something inane like that. And I wish it was better. And the real drama from this series would only come from those character interactions and not the fact that they have to decide to steal something from a ship and everyone kind of goes along with it. And that's it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I find the T'Pol stuff even more offensive, because someone said somewhere along the line that character development is when you show a character, you define a character by having them react the same way all the time, and then character development is when they finally decide to react a different way, right? Character growth. And so like in Deep Space Nine, you've got these characters who are pretty clearly defined about how they feel about certain things. Like you got your Odo, who's very kind of a hardliner, Law and Order type, and then at some point, Odo gets put into a position where he does something that is not so hardline, that he starts leading with emotion or something. Character development, consistency, then mixing that up is what makes these characters move forward. With T'Pol, I feel like they were going in the right direction, where you have her acting a certain way, but she's dealing with Trip now. They're getting all they're touching butts on the weekends,
having a lot of shower sex.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that was the other thing. I knew that was a dream as soon as they did it, but it made me think. I was like, are they hooking up regularly, or was that just a one-time thing? Because like, they don't fantasy. React. Yeah, they don't interact with each other on the ship like they're hooking up regularly. But you've got T'Pol, who is a Vulcan, who is a regimented, logical, your classic Vulcan, who is now changing. She's acting differently. She's becoming a little bit more emotional. She's spending time with these humans. That is an interesting character change. It's not an interesting character change when it turns out that it's because she's on space heroin.
She's on the dope.
You know? Yeah, because that gives you, it's not character change. It's just this crutch they pulled out of nowhere. But eventually they're going to, I would be shocked if she's not back to normal within like 3 episodes.
Right. And
by normal, I mean like, more logical Vulcan. Because like, it's been, what is this, 2005 or so? It's been 55 years of the same kind of Vulcan on every show.
Yeah.
Let her do something different, That's why it never really bothered me the way that they were playing her in the show, because I feel like it was interesting, like she was kind of riding the line enough that they could go interesting directions with her. But, yeah, the drug thing just makes her that much more, or that less of an interesting character to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, T'Pol could... T'Pol could have been built in that way where a Vulcan makes a decision to be with a human and in effect gives up on her Vulcanness and sort of trades in on that, and the emotion takes control, and whether or not that's a positive trade-off for her, it's whether or not it's something that she wants, whether or not it's something that she doesn't want. But I just think it's been so sloppy in interconnecting that growth that if it was intentional, the reason I never thought it was intentional from the start is because they never really say anything about these there's never any moment where other characters talk about T'Pol's inconsistency as a Vulcan. And we've complained about that in the podcast before. It's like, well, what are these Vulcans supposed to be? The characters always say, oh, if you're so logical Vulcan, as all these Vulcans are just freaking out all the time. It's like, are we missing something or the characters not know? So when they get to T'Pol here, it just feels like it could have been, if you had been laying this groundwork and this was the way that you wanted T'Pol to go, I'd agree it's a better way to end up there. The drug thing, as you say, I'm just repeating you now, but it undercuts all of that, and it's no longer about what T'Pol wants. It's about what this space rock can do for you, and it doesn't even justify why she wants it in the first place, which doesn't make any sense. And
I don't disagree that maybe the setup, the lead up with her is inconsistent. You know, the way that they're treating her, or they have treated her and her character. I think what shocks me is that they clearly got to a point where they were like, okay, we need to address this. And they chose space crack instead of what if she's a Vulcan who's maybe what if she's been living in the States so long she's starting to lose her accent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
They didn't go for that. They went for space drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's true. And the reason it's so awful is that it comes across as extremely after school special. It's just so literal what's going on that you're like, okay, this is just absurd and this is terrible.
And that's Phlox. That was the point where I discovered drugs. It's drugs, Phlox. It's what's doing this to me. It's drugs that I make in the basement. And I'm strung out because the basement got exploded and I couldn't get to my drugs.
To bring it back,
I'm on drugs.
To bring it back to, it should just have a couple scenes of her like sort of rummaging through Phlox's things as he comes back into the room or something. It's like, oh, T'Pol, what are you doing? Nothing.
I need the money, Phlox.
It's that Chappelle joke about it must be awful to have like a crackhead as your landlord because he's coming over every day going, I need the rent. He's like, it's the third of the month. I don't care. Pay me now. So bringing it back to Archer's problem is that I just think that what's strange for Enterprise as a show is that it knows what it's doing, and it's like the fifth Star Trek show at this point, so it has to know what it's playing against, and the nature of a prequel would be like, this is how you design a Federation ethics and things like that. To simply not have a lot of conversation about what's going on and instead rely on a very shaky scaffolding of relying on the Xindi plots and this race against the clock plot to provide enough information for you to be like, well, that's the only thing that they really could have done. It really just feels like a missed opportunity there to really talk about or look at a reason as to why Starfleet would have these values and what makes this the prime time that you'd have to break those kinds of things. Because, like as I said, the positive of this episode is this is maybe, outside of things like in the Pale Moonlight, this is maybe one of the most drastic instances of a Starfleet crew doing something wrong that a cast has done intentionally and knowing that what they're doing is the wrong thing to do. You know, and I think that's a big step. But I don't walk away from the episode going, I don't walk away from this thinking that Archer ends it in the way that Sisko ended the Pale Moonlight, where he's reflecting on this, going, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it. You know, like I've learned something about myself, and I've learned about what it takes to do it. The show just treats... Good.
I was just going to say, to be fair to that, though, we're not really through the weeds yet to get to that point. Like, Sisko gets to that point after everything's said and done.
Yes.
Archer, we're kind of still in the process of what his actions are, what the results of his actions are going to be.
I could see an ending scene of this as the Enterprise flies away from that ship where Archer is sitting, maybe talking to somebody, talking to Trip, or like that scene where at the very end where he talks to Trip's like, "You did the right thing, Captain," and then Archer looks back, he's like, I wish I had a response to that." I feel that that's a moment for that kind of Sisko talk there, and I know you don't want to bring it too close to the Pale Moonlight because then it would just be considered a ripoff of that, but I do need something there. Like the reason that Pale Moonlight works is because they took a captain, and the big, not the reveal, but the punchline of the episode is that he admits at the finale that what I did was bad, but given the chance, I'd do it again. Like this was the only thing, and I feel bad. I feel awful about what happened. He murdered somebody, or he like didn't prevent somebody from being murdered. Archer has a nicer outcome, but it's more, as you say, more direct to it. But it doesn't feel like Archer has to struggle with this decision. And I think that all of these decisions should be a struggle for this crew. And I never get the sense that he's really conflicted about it. He acts conflicted, but I don't think he really is.
It would have been cool if the last scene was Archer standing out, looking out the window, or whatever. And then from behind him, somebody says, You don't know what you've just done. And then Archer turns around and it's Daniels. Mm-hmm. Because whatever he's done has somehow fucked with the timeline in a way that Daniels was, and Archer's just like, I did what I had to do at this moment in time, and it was something that Daniels was not expecting.
Sure.
So give it some kind of, give it a little zip to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use Daniels for something interesting.
Yeah. No, I would.
But Daniels now has like a elephant trunk for a nose.
He's got a third arm or something like that. The timeline is
Archer's actions have busted the space-time continuum.
And before we go to the patron thoughts and everything, I liked this.
Do you realize what you've done? Now whales are going to go extinct. And someone's going to have to go back in time and get whales in about 80 years.
You've made the plot to Voyage Home completely nonsensical at this point, Jonathan Archer. And it's the best TOS movie. Controversial opinion from Daniels. And what's funny, before we go to final thoughts, I liked this episode too for Enterprise, I think. But the series itself just has these flaws in it that, outside of the T'Pol thing, the T'Pol thing is not good. But the series itself just has real problems with telling Star Trek stories for some reason in a way that feels like an evolution off of where the prior series had come from. It feels like it just reverts back to a more simple state of being. And because it's dealing with more complicated plots and more complicated ethics, it just ends up seeming a little bit simplistic. But I did think that this was a bold choice for the show to do. I just wish it was a little bit better.
What's funny, though, and not to just continually Discovery bash, but isn't this kind of similar to what happened towards the end of season 3 of Discovery, where they're like, we have to do this thing that is morally gray, and then what's her name goes off and does it herself, and nobody deals with the fact that she did it. They just do. Like, what I'm saying is they handle it better in this than they do in Discovery.
Yeah.
Which is not really saying that. We didn't even talk about the sphere lady. The ghost sphere lady there.
There's a couple scenes of Xindi
really know
in this
what there is
too.
to say, but
yeah, they opened it with a discussion about the Xindi as well, because they tell the Aquatics to take Archer back to his ship. It's just, there's not much to say. She's the she that we talked about in Azadi Prime, obviously. She's a sphere builder. That is what they look like, I guess. And it's going to be super underwhelming when they become the big bad of this, and the Xindi, except for the reptilians, and maybe the bug Xindi might join the reptilians because they're freaky as well. Sort of continue on trying to destroy Earth, and the rest of the Xindi and Earth and the humans are trying to stop it from happening. The sphere builders are just a Deus Ex Machina, basically. Like, it's a way to pull the strings of the conflict.
That's why I'm not 100% convinced that they are going to move into being like an effective villain for the rest of the season. Like, I don't know if they're going to get much more involved than they were in this episode, as far as being like, well, next time, make sure everybody's here because it's wasting my time.
Sure. No boots on the ground
I feel like
from these guys. Just kind of Yeah,
because the puppet mastery nature of it makes a lot more sense for them, and it makes more sense for the villain, the villain to be the reptilians, because there's now a split in the
council,
Xindi. And man, I love those council guys. The scene with the three council guys, the Wolfman guy, and
the two humanoids, the black and the white humanoid.
What the hell's his Detmer? What the hell's his name? Degra, and the other guy. Great voices. They've just got such good voices where they're all in there and they're like, well, we need to have him in one piece. We can't ask him questions if he's dead. You know, it's not quite Klingon, but it's got that like booming. These guys probably have done Shakespeare.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Theater acting, projecting to the back of the room with their speech. The
reptilians have small ears, so you must project.
We'll have more to say about this. I don't think you have much to learn about the Xindi in this one, but it doesn't really add anything to what that species does. We meet the female sphere builder.
I was a little confused exactly about the whole process of getting Archer back to the ship, because I didn't realize that the aquatic guys were in on it with the ones that split from the reptilians.
They're friendly. Yeah, they're friendly, I assume.
And then Archer was in like a water ship, but then he ended up in space. And then nobody else really knew how he got back. And
no, they just shot him on a shuttle pod. It seems like the aquatics just launched him into space. Yeah,
it seemed really strange to me, and just sort of like we got to get him back to the like the reptilians didn't realize this was happening. I don't know. It's obviously it's just like we got to move this along and get him back to the ship. Yeah. But there's the specifics were a little bit gray.
I didn't get the sense from the Xindi, the Degra Xindi group, that they were sending Archer back. Did they say that, or what? I mean, I think they do say it because of the aquatics. But I thought they were bringing him back to be questioned by them. But they are. So I mean, it's obviously part of this con where they send him back with that note that had the hidden message in it to be like, meet us at this secret location. Really, the fatal flaw in that plan is that it would be like if me and you were walking down the street and you got jumped by three guys with baseball bats and they were just bashing your legs with the baseball bats. I was like, Clay, we have to meet over there. If you could walk 3 miles over here this way after this attack, maybe that'll be a good place to join. I would say maybe Degra should pick a closer spot.
Wes, you can see that my kneecap is 10 yards away from me now. I'm not going to be walking anywhere.
Degra knows the Enterprise was blown to shit.
That guy that we just passed, he has kneecaps. I know what I have to do.
They plug in real easy, just
but
like
I'm
a warp
not sure
drive.
I'm strong enough to do it. Yeah, exactly. Just slot him right
Slap
in.
it right in. That went quicker than I expected.
Duct tape that shit up.
That's really my only problem with that. Degra knew that the ship was completely in rough shape from that attack. There's no way that they don't know that had happened, and to expect them to go an incredible distance without knowing that is a little bit strange. But it gives you the motivation to do what has to be done in this episode. So let's go to Patron Thoughts. We'll take a break now. We'll play a clip from the episode, which was Damage. Then we'll come back, read some Patron Thoughts, and give our final thoughts about Damage.
If I had another option, I'd take it.
We're no different than the Marauders who attacked us when we entered the Expanse.
We're a lot different.
By stealing their warp coil, we could be condemning them to death.
We're gonna leave them a supply of trellium, along with some extra food. I'm not saying it'll be easy for them, but they'll stand a decent chance of making it home.
You're forgetting that we're in in a dangerous region of space. Our assault could cripple their ability to defend themselves.
Not if we do it right.
And what if something goes wrong?
Thank you very much for listening to the show today. Thank you to our supporters at patreon.com/The Penske File. A couple dollars a month gets you extra stuff. You get extra podcasts. We talked about the Battlestar Galactica miniseries. Friday the 13th series is continuing. Clay and Amanda just released episode 6 for that. Jason lives! Exclamation points. There's a whole bunch of stuff. If you want like 100 podcasts on various things, you can go to patreon.com/The Penske File. Support the show there and get access to them.
Are we in danger of becoming like a New York diner menu of podcasts where it's just like you open it up and there's like it folds out twice?
Yeah.
And you're just like, well, they've got pancakes and they've also got lobster and everything in between. You know
that's any restaurant with the smaller the menu, the better quality food is at the restaurants is the general rule of thumb. When you go to a Cheesecake Factory, you're not exactly getting the hand curated menu that you'd expect from a small boutique shop. Special thank you goes to our Captain Tier supporters, who are Tarek Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Andrew Churlog, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Matt Cutler, Matt Christian Pouch, Nick Sergi, Cardinal Doomsday, Grim Santos, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Ball 13 Hero, Jordan Cooper, Darth Mosk, Russell Elledge, HH28, Stephen Minton, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Patrick Siva, Dave Davies, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Sanjuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, Nick the Rat, Matt Houston, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Garoppolo John Zoin, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardeur, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunter's EWNF Remixes, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Beal, Lokai, Tuvix Must Die, Tommy Tango, and Jonas. Thank you very much for your support at this point. We much appreciate it. Let's go to patron thoughts. There's a couple of them. We read Kyle's, so we banged that one out of the way. And then we'll go to Matt Ross says, Damage. What annoyed me here was that the Enterprise has sympathizers in the Xindi, yet those sympathizers don't come to help. The moral conundrum to steal a warp coil, I keep thinking it's a slinky, is real, but don't worry, Enterprise will never fly back to the ship and give them a luckily compatible replacement part. Good to see Casey Bigg as the alien captain. T'Pol and her addiction is a little weird in that the exposure to Trillium-D makes a Vulcan a zombie, except when you shoot it up, which it seems easily cured. Why is Archer going on this mission personally? 3 slinkies out of 5. Latte Librarian says, T'Pol deserves better than this addiction storyline. Archer is mildly convincing as an angsty pirate. 3 wide-eyed explorers out of 5. Royo says, It is my opinion that Damage is the best episode of Enterprise. Unfortunately, it's chained to all the weak links of the Xindi arc. This is not an episode I'd recommend to people new to Star Trek, nor would I regularly rewatch this episode due to all the context and bag need for the whole season to set it up. We finally see Archer step it up as a leader and make the hard decisions, and for characters to pay for their own personal flaws. Critically, the script understands that just because Archer has made a decision, it's not automatically morally right, unlike that time Archer sided with those pirates against humanity's merchant fleet. I suppose T'Pol this whole time has been jonesing for that Trillium-D, although given that Spock posed as a Vulcan merchant dealing in Kevas and Trillium and Trillium and Errand of Mercy, did that mean he was posing as a drug dealer this whole time? Don't remember that reference at all. 5 out of 5 from Royale.
That was a lot of caveats too. This is the best episode of Enterprise.
Well, to be fair, he does say that early on about it. It's the best for Enterprise. The next comment is Poindexter G. I'm not really sure if making T'Pol an emotion junkie to explain her most recent behavior is actually better than just leaving her inconsistent and unexplained. I may have been wrong about the reset button. The lighting in this episode and the dressing to the set really sell the damage. The scene with Archer and Phlox stood out to me. My favorite little detail, the low-fidelity, crackly audio on the ship's comms. That's a good point. I didn't notice that. Colonel Doomsday says, the final comment, Damage, the episode where Archer abandons his morals, T'Pol admits to drug addiction, and T'Pol has an erotic hallucination that literally makes her turn green. I have a friend who thinks this episode is great, but there's too much craziness and sex in it for me. I enjoyed Travis telling Hoshi that they'll get home, though. 3 sex scenes in the shower out of 5.
Don't listen to that guy. He's not our core demographic.
So maybe the patrons, or at least the commenting patrons, are a little bit more neutral on this one. I have seen Damage regularly seen in general as one of the better episodes of Star Trek, but what say you? Thank you, patrons, for your comments. Clay, what are you going to give this one?
Why don't you go first on this one?
Sure. So, as a first note, this episode made me retroactively go back to Azadi Prime, and Azadi Prime, which I gave a 4, I'm changing to a 3. This one,
interesting.
This one is going to get the 4 because I think my calibration was wrong. I think that this is an above average episode, and Azadi Prime was just average when I look back on it. But this one, the core idea here makes this one of the best Enterprise episodes that they've done, I think. Like the concept of what they're trying to do and where this is coming at this point in the season is very good for this show and for Star Trek in general. I think that this is the kind of big event that needed to happen. Never been done in Star Trek before to this extent of the characters actually doing something actively wrong and knowing about it. I think, as Royo says, it has all the Enterprise flaws. He didn't say Enterprise flaws, he said Xindi flaws, but I'm going to say it's Enterprise flaws that kind of stop it from really being super effective. And to me, that just knocks it down. What could have been a 5, what could have been a great linchpin turning point episode in this Xindi arc where the desperation causes Archer to steal and abandon people in their time of need, doesn't land as effectively as it should have. And so I'm going to give it a 4 because I think it's a pretty good episode and revert Azadi Prime back to a 3. And that's my final answer.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree, and I think I'm going to go with a 4.
Okay.
That T'Pol stuff is really dragging it down.
T'Pol knocks it. Yeah, it can't be. No matter how good the Archer stuff, that T'Pol thing would knock it down from a 5. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think even without the T'Pol stuff, this wouldn't be a 5 for me.
Yeah.
As it stands, I do think it has the potential to be 5. I think it has the potential to be the best episode, but I don't think it's there. As much as I do think that what they are doing in the position that they put the Enterprise in is very good and very effective.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to go with a 4.
Yeah, seems fair to me. Thank you, patrons. We both give it a 4. You're keeping Azadi Prime at a 4, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I still like that one.
That's fine.
That one's pretty good. That's
fine. So I will revert mine. This is a 4. Clay gives this one a 4. The patrons a little bit more mixed on it. Some 5s, some 3s. I don't think anyone gave it lower than a 3, so maybe it's not a reviled episode. Thank you, everybody. Patreon.com/Lipinski File if you want to support the show there. Thank you for listening. It's been fun. We're continuing the Xindi story, which is getting close to the end at this point, interestingly. Maybe not interestingly, but we have like 5 or 6 episodes left, and honestly, that actually feels like a lot in some ways. Like, I'm surprised what's going to happen is going to take 5 episodes to reconcile itself.
Yeah, like what else is it? Well, the next episode.
They meet Degra.
Hang out with
right?
Degra. Yeah.
They convince him in that episode.
Right.
Then you're chasing the reptilians, I'm assuming, after that point? For like 3 episodes?
Yeah, that's a lot. And well, I mean, they might. It's possible they could wrap that up and then still have a couple episodes for like Fallout and stuff.
You'll have a Cold War episode, I think. They have to do a focused Cold War episode, I would assume, to sort of close out that temporal aspect.
If they do that, I bet that is not the next one, but the one after that.
Yeah.
So like they meet Degra, they know what they have to do, and then you get the Cold War episode. That's sort of like knocking them off course a little bit or whatever.
It delays them a little bit. Yeah.
Maybe they go back to like St. Louis in 1986 or something. I don't know. That does seem like kind of a lot, but we'll see.
All right.
We need the intervention episode for T'Pol.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That's a full hour right there. A lot of people sitting in Archer's ready room on the couch. She comes in. She says, "What the hell's going on?" Yeah.
Clip show.
Yep.
Intervention clip show.
That's a Paul storyline is pretty devastating. We'll see where it goes, whether or not this is devastating or just a bump in the road. Strange decision, but it'll be interesting.
I think it's going to be worse if they I think it sucks as it is. Like at this point, I think it sucks. I would rather, if they're doing this as a reset, I would rather they just reset than go like full bore into the drug storyline where you have like the episode where she's crawling around on the floor, going through withdrawal and trips like holding her while, Tears in Heaven are playing or whatever.
Yep.
I don't need to see that. I don't need, if you're going to do it, just cut big. But, we'll see.
Do you have anything you want to plug before we go?
We've got Rotten Horror Picture Show. We've got Audition, Takashi Miike Classic Audition. That's out. Then the next one after that will be A Quiet Place Part 2, which is fun because we actually got to go to the theater for that. As you said, Friday the 13th Part 6 is up on Patreon. We've got Badass coming out at this point. Joker's Millions will be out. Joker's Millions and Growing Pains, and I forget what the ones after that are, but they're out there. So check those out.
Yep. ThePenskeyFile.com/badass, ThePenskeyFile.com/rotten horror. Those are the two places for those. They're on all the
So
podcast
simple.
apps.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember. Simple. And they're on the YouTube channel if you're more interested in that. We have a Clips channel. You can check out the Clips channel. If the podcast is too long for you, you just want the greatest hits sequence, you go to our Clips channel, which is linked in the YouTube account. And there's the Discord.
Is the Rick Berman supercut on that channel?
No, I think that's on the main channel. I should put another copy up on the Clips. I'm pretty sure the Rick Berman is on the main channel because most people saw it, so that would mean that it's on the main. Discord. There's a Discord channel if you're interested in talking to other people about these things. There's links all down below for all that stuff. That's it. We're done. Thank you very much. We'll be back with the next episode, which I don't have lined up for me right now. I'm going to hit the button and see what it is. It's The Forgotten. The Forgotten is the next episode. So, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.